The very last major thing we'll talk about here is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is found within the hypothalamus, and it secretes a very important hormone, melatonin. Melatonin does a number of fantastic things. Regulates your circadian rhythm is probably the major thing. It's also involved with some growth, with a number of other things, but really the major thing that I really want you to know is what it does. Regulates your night and your day cycles, okay, your circadian rhythm. It is regulated by the hypothalamus, and there's the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Okay. And this is sympathetic. Okay. This is sympathetic response. It's the sympathetic neurons that stimulate the suprachiasmatic nucleus to stimulate the pineal gland to produce melatonin. No sympathetic input, no stimulation of the suprachiasmatic nucleus, no melatonin. It does require an important piece, okay? It requires your eyeball. We have melanopsin found in those ganglion cells. We have photoreceptors, bipolar cells, ganglion cells, which then give off axons that make up the optic nerve, right? Melanopsin is found in those ganglion cells. So when light hits it, the eye, the retina, that is what's going to help to stimulate sympathetic activity onto that suprachiasmatic nucleus to secrete melatonin. And it's fascinating. It's produced melatonin, obviously, with a heck of a lot more it's involved with nighttime, a heck of a lot more. Okay, so here it is. So here is day and night. Here's my clock cells. I think the book refers to them as biological clock cells. Okay, sure. Okay. I just refer to it as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. All right. When light is coming in, we get inhibitory messages. Okay. Those inhibitory messages inhibit the production of melatonin. And that's what it looks like. I don't really care. I'm not going to ask the chemical makeup of it. It is the visible spectrum that is inhibiting that suprachiasmatic nucleus. At nighttime, as sunlight becomes less and less in the sky, we have less and less influence on that suprachiasmatic nucleus. So now I have a greater sympathetic input going into it. This inhibits it, which allows the pineal gland to secrete melatonin. There is a lot of research into that blue light phenomena. And there was couple years ago, there was in 2019, there was a pretty significant study that was looking at it, and it was blue light, yes, but no. And then in 2020, I believe there was another study that came out that looked at blue light having a much more greater effect on that pineal gland. And from what I've read, blue light is more prevalent at nighttime. My question, though, is we have adapted to function in the visible light spectrum. Why wouldn't all wavelengths of light then affect it? Because wouldn't all light affect it equally? I don't know. It's kind of interesting in some of the discussion points trying to, figure out as to why. What they have found is that in this recent study is that blue light does emanate greater, that wavelength is more prevalent at nighttime. If you have that one wavelength, that is enough to have an effect on that suprachiasmatic nucleus and really, involving it to stop melatonin from being produced by the pineal gland. Some of those studies are very difficult to do. They've discovered some of these concepts in actually not looking at specifically blue light, but they've looked at the pineal gland in terms of, I talked about it being involved with growth. They've actually looked at the pineal gland in reference with fat production. Those that are looking at devices for a much greater length of time at nighttime, it stimulated some regions in the brain associated with hunger, with lipolysis, or ultimately facilitating lipolysis by the body by triggering a couple different hormones and secreted from the brain. That's how they've figured out this concept with melatonin and light at night. And that's where I've seen the majority of the research in, with looking at weight gain for those that stay up later at night watching devices. Why else would you be, why else would you stay up if you weren't looking at something, watching TV, okay, playing video games, reading a book on your device, okay? Again, that light, or having the light on the side and reading a book, okay? Don't want to bag too much on devices. But any sort of light helps to inhibit that melatonin. And melatonin, is what you take to fall asleep. So during the day, it's that light that helps to inhibit the effect of the suprachiasmatic nucleus on the pineal gland. I haven't seen a study yet, a recent study, looking at specifically the blue light glasses and their effectiveness. I've just seen a few. I've just seen a few write-ups on it, and I haven't seen anything with a lot of data points to suggest that yes, get the blue glasses that filter out that blue light. Okay, because literally, we'd have to change every single light bulb. Okay, LED lights would have to be different. We'd have to coat them on the inside with something, I believe, to filter out that blue wavelength. And that's the majority of all lights anymore, because they're more efficient. You can see where you could have a lot of potential sources of error and inherent flaws in a study when, I mean, I think all the damn lights in my house now are LED based except for maybe a couple down here. So you can see it's going to be really hard to isolate and figure out, is it specifically blue light? Unless you want to sit and live in a facility overnight for weeks on end to do that. I'm sure that'd pay you pretty well. So I know there's a handful of questions on the pineal gland. Maybe one question from this slide. This is me just saying there's a ton of stuff out there. Okay. Leptin from the adipose cells, gastrin from the stomach, which we'll talk about later in the semester. Secretin and cholecystokinin from cells in the small intestine. These all are hormones. These all cause the stomach, gastrin causes the stomach to increase our production of hydrochloric acid, okay? Gastric secretions. Small intestines enacted by secretin, cholecystokinin. This is going to help slow down the emptying out of the stomach to ensure that I can absorb nutrients properly in the small intestine. Slow down the motility of the small intestine to ensure I can suck all the nutrients out. Testosterone, right? I mean, aside from being produced there in the cortex, I mean, there are, we have cells in the thing, in the testes that are involved with testosterone production, cells within the ovary that are involved with production of estrogens, progesterones within the uterus, the ovary. Okay. So we have other structures that can secrete these things as well. Placenta, human chorionic gonadotrophin, or really chorionic somatomammatrophin. These are, and if you look at this word here, somatotrophin, this is very similar to growth hormone, right? Growth hormone, GH. HCG is very similar to growth hormone. It's going to stimulate massive, I mean, obviously you are creating life, which is crazy in and of itself, right? You have to double up everything. You're eating for 2. You're supplying blood for 2. Oxygen for 2. Growth hormone helps with the facilitating of growth of tissues that need to happen to sustain this creature that grows inside of you. It also helps to stimulate their production as well. The placenta secretes, I can't even remember off the top of my head, a vast number of hormones. Right? A vast number of hormones that are going to help stimulate the female system to accommodate and to stimulate growth of the embryo into the fetus.